Can you believe it? We are here, our final week of the Ten Commandments. Now, I can't guarantee that this will be the last time I ask you to recite the Ten Commandments, but it'll be at least the last time for a while. I'll just need to keep you on your toes as we move forward. And I hope I have delivered on my guarantee from 10 weeks ago that by the end of the summer you would know, if not all of the commandments, at least more than you did at the beginning. Is that true? Did I deliver? Okay. All right, good. So, for one final time on Sunday morning, let us go through these 10 commandments. Ready? Number 1. No other gods. Don't give anything more reverence than you give to God. Number 2. No graven images. Do not confine God to any one single image. Number 3. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Be careful how you use God's name. Number 4. Number 4. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Remember that you are more than what you do. All right, number 5. Honor your father and your mother. Give your parents the weight of real people. All right, number 6. Thou shalt not kill. Do not take life. Number 7. No adultery. Be faithful to your commitments. Number 8. No stealing. What? Don't eat bacon. Yeah. Nice. No stealing. No stealing. Don't take what is not yours. Number 9. Last week. Lying. No lying. Testify to the truth, as we swear on the Bible. Yes, testify to the truth. And this morning we are covering coveting. So I cannot believe that we have finally reached the end here. In many ways, it seems like we have just really begun to crack open these words and hear what they have to say to us. That we've only kind of just begun to mine their depths and how they can lead us to a deeper relationship with God and with each other. Now, I can only speak for myself. Some of you are probably ready to be done with them and move on to the next thing. But I have found myself actually wanting more. As we close out these 10 commandments, I find myself wanting more conversations about how we restrict our idea and our understanding of God by confining God to images. I find myself wanting more time to sit with the idea and the thought and the practice of Sabbath. I find myself wanting to give more thought about what it means to not take life in all of its many forms and dimensions. More reflection on the idea of faithfulness, more discussion and conversation about what healthy expressions of human sexuality look like, more dialogue about the truths that we profess, and the larger story of God's grace that we live in. I find myself wanting more of these conversations. I don't know about you, but that's where I am. I want more, which seems really fitting considering that this final commandment is all about wanting more, right? Not more of something you already have or more of just anything in general. This commandment specifies that it's about not desiring the things that belong to your neighbor, which is an important distinction to keep in mind as we go through this discussion, as we take a look at this last commandment, because this commandment is about wanting what someone else has, what belongs to someone else, and it's about what that wanting does to us and our relationship with them, what it does to our own sense of self and our relationship and connection to God. Also, I wanted to take a minute, and for those of you who have been worried about the different numbering system that I mentioned 8 weeks ago in week number 2, that there's different ways of numbering the commandments, that this is where it all comes back together. The Catholic and Lutheran tradition normally break this commandment up into 2. They separate coveting your neighbor's spouse from coveting everything else that belongs to your neighbor. So it's kind of a nice gesture not to lump your neighbor's wife in with donkeys and oxen. It is a nice gesture, but when we consider this as a single commandment, one that prohibits coveting, it emphasizes the idea of coveting rather than the things that are being coveted. So we count this as commandment number 10, whereas Catholics and Lutheran traditions count it as 9 and 10. So everyone has 10 commandments, just in case you were worried from 8 weeks ago. All right. So typically this commandment is understood to be about not desiring all the stuff that your neighbor has, right? The list of stuff. Servants and wife and house and oxen and donkeys, which in itself is hard. Right? It is hard not to covet what your neighbor has, especially when people are busy presenting and sharing photoshopped and carefully cultivated, curated versions of themselves with the world. Right? We find ourselves coveting lives that aren't really real. And last week, I really didn't have time to get into how we bear false witness against each other by the personas that we project online or even in our interactions with each other. But this comes into play here where we find ourselves coveting the lives and the things of others that sometimes just aren't real or realistic. But aside from coveting all those things, if you have been on this journey for the past 9 weeks with me, I bet that you won't be surprised that this word is about more than just being content with what you have. Every week we've kind of looked at what the narrow interpretation of these words have given us before breaking them open into a larger discussion. And this word is about more than not trying to keep up with the proverbial Joneses. As with all the other words, this one invites us to take another look, a deeper look, to break it open and then hear what it has to say to us. Because when we take a deeper look at this word, we find that unlike the others, this commandment strikes a somewhat different tone. If you think about all these other commandments, they all have had to do with taking or not taking certain actions. The emphasis has always been on the action. And this is the only one that addresses a particular mindset. This commandment prompts us to ask what it means to desire or to covet something that belongs to someone else, even when we don't act on that desire. It asks us to consider, what does having the desire for more do to the fabric of our society, our relationship with others, our relationship with God, and even our own sense of self and well-being. Now, for those of you who are, like me, interested in nerdy Bible stuff, this section is for you. For those of you who are not, you can zone out for a little bit and join me in about 5 minutes. Okay? Because one scholar who is way more into ancient languages and better at deciphering them than I am, undertook an extensive study of where this construction that's translated as desiring your neighbor's house or coveting your neighbor's house is used in other places in Scripture. And I'll spare you all the boring but fascinating to nerds like me details, because I found his conclusions pretty interesting. Because what he ultimately discovered is that the verb translated as coveting or desiring is usually paired with another verb that means seizing or taking. So these two verbs usually always occur together in Scripture. And when they occur with the verb here translated as house, it usually means the entire household, including the land. All right, so the word is household or land holdings. And these findings prompted this scholar to argue that this commandment was put in place to guard against the Israelites succumbing to the economic system practiced by the surrounding Canaanite city-state clans. All right? I told you this was going to be a little bit nerdy, but it's really interesting if you stick with me for a little bit. And these rulers of these city-state clans owned the land. So the land was owned by a handful of people, and they let it out to the majority of the population, who were peasant farmers. And these peasant farmers were then required to work the land and to pay half or more of what they produced back to the owners of the estates. Okay? So land was consolidated and controlled by only a few people at the top. And those who worked the land barely got by. These peasant farmers. This is what was practiced in the surrounding area by the Canaanite city-states. So with the Israelites, God was doing a new thing. Not surprising, the heart of this commandment connects back to God's heart that was laid out in the very beginning, in the preamble to these holy words that we keep hearing the echoes of week after week. I am the Holy One who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. This is the one who are giving these words. Remember who is speaking to you. The one who is about to raise you up as a new kind of people. This one has set you apart to be people of the Most High God. You see, having suffered for generations as slaves in Egypt, the people of Israel were given these holy words to establish a new kind of society and to safeguard against them becoming like the people that had oppressed them. Oppressed and enslaved them for generations. And part of this new thing, part of this new way of being in the world, along with worshiping only one God, along with not fashioning that God in any one image, was this commandment about how the land was to be divided and passed down within families. This was a commandment to keep the land intact and in the hands of those who worked the land, rather than in a few absentee warring landlords. This commandment was to keep those with deeper pockets and more resources who desired to increase their land holdings from buying up and buying out the holdings of their less fortunate neighbors and forcing them to then work the land for next to nothing. And we see this theme expanded and projected further in the other parts of the legal code. There are rules about how much interest can be charged on loans against land and crops, as well as when land that had been sold was to be returned to its original owner after a certain amount of time. If you've ever heard the year of Jubilee, that's when land that had been bought was returned to the original owner. So not desiring and then seizing your neighbor's holdings was to ensure that everyone had access to land and a way to provide for their families. Which seems, I don't know about you, but as we've gone through these discussions, I've been amazed at how these commandments have lined up with what is going on in the world. This seems like a fitting message for Labor Day weekend, right? This day that is set apart to honor the labor movement and the power of collective action to improve the working conditions for everybody, but especially those who worked the land. And it's tempting to make just this subtle nod to Labor Day, but we'd be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge how many workers today still struggle to survive in a system that is dependent on their labor, yet disinclined to treat them fairly. So while it is good to honor how far we have come and the work that has been done, Labor Day is also a reminder that the work is not done. Not until all have the opportunity and freedom to enjoy the fullness of life that God desires for all of us will our work be done. Because at its heart, this is a word about curbing our desire for more so that everyone may have enough. Now, there's only one slight problem with this understanding of this scholar that closely links desiring your neighbor's property with actually seizing it. the seizing part seems to fall underneath the jurisdiction of number 8, which is stealing. Very good, yes. Seizing property would be stealing. Yeah, number it out. Every once in a while, I'm just going to yell out a number, and I expect you guys to tell me what. So just be prepared for that. So seizing seems to fall under the jurisdiction of number 8, no stealing. It seems to be kind of a redundant commandment. But here's where the different tone of this commandment comes into play, and it changes the conversation and makes it a lot more interesting. Because the focus is on the desire that leads to action rather than the action itself. It calls us to look at the desire. Because the desire for more is a dangerous drive. It is an insatiable urge that may not lead us to actually seize anything illegally, but yet it is very good at justifying how we take more than what we need. This desire for more helps us find the loopholes to get what we want in ways that allow us to still feel like good people. This commandment's focus on mindset reveals the larger issue that there are ways for us to keep all of these commandments, that we can technically follow all the rules and give ourselves good stars for good behavior, and yet still pursue our own agenda and turn a deaf ear to the cries of our neighbors. And in the most extreme cases, some even seek to alter the law to accommodate their greed or bias or cruelty so that they can keep doing what they desire and keep seizing more than their fair share. We all know what it's like to desire more. It's that serpent hissing in our ear to reach for just a little bit more. It's the fear that we don't have enough. It's the doubt that God will provide for our every need. As if accumulating more stuff will protect us from the uncertainties of life. This commandment is about the insatiable desire for more and the belief that undergirds that desire, that God's grace is not sufficient for us. So we let our fears and our insecurities drive us to acquire more and more things as if all this stuff can safeguard us against the uncertainties of life or even the certainty that death will eventually come for us all. That's the lesson we heard in our gospel reading. Stuff can't save us. And the hard truth is that once we give in to this desire for more, more is never enough. Our neighbors will always have more stuff that isn't ours, no matter how much we take away. And to be fair, this curiosity with things that aren't ours and the desire to make them ours is part of how we are wired. Just the other night, my mom was telling me about how my little niece and nephew, the twins, who aren't even a year old yet, already display this desire for more, right? Yeah, when Emerson sees Miles playing with a toy, even if she has the same exact toy or is surrounded by countless others, what does she do? She crawls over there and she takes what Miles has. Because the truth is we don't really have a desire for the thing itself. What's really at play is our desire for the experience of the person enjoying that thing. We want their joy. We often have to be taught and shown how to care and how to let me start again. We often have to be taught and shown how to share and care for others. We have to learn the joy of serving others and discover how to take delight in building up our community rather than tearing it down. Because the desire for more eats us from the inside out. And it distracts us from pursuing what will truly bring us joy. Rather than gathering up and hoarding earthly treasures here, Jesus teaches his followers to store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, right? But this doesn't mean to do good deeds to fill up a storehouse somewhere in the sky for the great hereafter. It means working to disconnect ourselves from the things of this world that cannot satisfy our souls or save us. And instead, to redirect our desire for more things to a desire to make God's peace and love and mercy and justice and hope and grace more real in the world today. These are the treasures of heaven that we should be pursuing. This final word, this commandment calls us to operate out of an economy of grace and abundance rather than one of scarcity and stinginess. This is God's last word, final word given directly to the people. It may be the last, but it is far from the least. It is possible that God may have wanted to give the people more words, but this was as much as they could take. All right? 10 fingers, 10 commandments, that's it. Remember, these 10 words were the only ones that God spoke directly to the people gathered together. After this word, the people told Moses never to let that happen again. Right? From now on, they said, you speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, or we will die. They couldn't take hearing directly from God. So this was God's final word to them. So this truly is the words of God for the people of God. So as our official discussion of these holy utterances comes to an end, I pray that the conversations about them continue. That we may not stop breaking open these words and letting us break us open in return. So as we conclude, I pray that these words take hold of your heart. I pray that they take root in your life and help you to keep growing into the person that God is calling you to be. Beloved of God, these are the words of God for you. Thanks be to God. Amen.